In this video, I'm going to be explaining everything you need to know about masking fluid, including what it is, 5 ways to apply it, 3 uses for it, and do's and don'ts for removing it. I'm Abigail, and I make speed paintings and drawings, tutorials, lessons, and demonstrations designed to help you improve your art skills. So if you are new here, consider subscribing so you don't miss out on any of my new weekly videos. Now onto this tutorial. All of the materials I am using will be listed in the video description for you to refer to if you are interested. What is masking fluid? Masking fluid, or also known as liquid frisket, is basically like a liquid tape that protects areas in your painting that you want to paint later but don't necessarily want to paint around over and over again. This can save you so much time when painting and make the experience so much more fun. But how do you use it? Here are my top 5 ways of applying masking fluid. The first way is with a paintbrush, but be warned, masking fluid destroys the bristles, so please use an old or already damaged brush for this, and mark it as your masking fluid brush. I do have a trick to reduce how badly it destroys your brushes, however it won't completely protect it. This trick is to cover your bristles in soap before dipping it into your masking fluid. Since the soap is water resistant, it will push the masking fluid away from the bristles, meaning that you have to work quickly before the masking fluid just runs off the brush. The second way of applying masking fluid is to use the handle of the brush instead of the bristles. This is definitely my go-to technique for applying masking fluid, since you just dip it into the masking fluid and then add it to your paper. Then once the masking fluid is dry on the handle, you can just rub it off. Alright, now onto the third method, using a stylus. This can be one from scrapbooking or for nail art. Either way will work the same. We use the stylus similarly to the paintbrush handle, however, this one gives you slightly less time to apply it, since the brush handle can hold more masking fluid than the stylus. However, you can sometimes get different variations in sizes than you would with a paintbrush handle. I prefer to only use this for small details, not creating borders between sections. The next way is by far the cheapest, which is to use a toothpick. This one by far gives you the tiniest detail, but also limits how much time you have to apply it. So once again, I don't like to use this in larger areas and rather prefer to use it for details even smaller than the ones I could use the stylus for. And lastly, but certainly not least, using textured objects like sponges. These are not only great for protecting areas that it is used on, but can also create more of a sense of texture. Alright, now I'm going to show you 3 common uses and when each of these are useful to use. The most common use for masking fluid is to preserve the white of the paper. All you have to do is apply the masking fluid in any of the 5 previously shown ways in the areas you want to protect. The next use for masking fluid is to protect an already painted area. This works the same as the last, except that you add a few layers of paint first. This technique can be tricky though, since if it doesn't work, you will take the paint off or rip your paper. So I highly recommend trying this use on a separate piece of paper before trying it on your final artwork. The third use is to create a border between objects, like the background and the main subject. This is my go-to technique since I can add the masking fluid along the edge of my main subject and then use the wet on wet technique for the background without worrying about getting paint on my main subject. It doesn't matter which of these applications or uses you decide to go with, the next step is the same for all of them. You let the masking fluid dry thoroughly and then add your paint how you normally would. Except instead of painting around the areas you added masking fluid to, you can paint right over the top of instead. Then you let the paint dry thoroughly before removing it, since if it's not dry, the paint will get onto your fingers and you will smudge those areas you worked so hard to protect. Now, moving on, we have the do's and don'ts for removing the masking fluid. When removing it, the first don't is when the masking fluid wasn't dry before you added paint on top. When you do this, you will tear the paper when trying to remove it, since the paint mixed into the masking fluid and soaked into the paper instead of sitting on top of it. The second don't is to try to pick or pull off the masking fluid quickly. This will also result in tearing of the paper. Here's what you should do instead. First, wait for your masking fluid to dry completely before adding paint on top of it. Then wait for the paint to dry thoroughly too. Then when it's time to remove it, go slow, lightly rubbing against the surface of the masking fluid until it clumps up on its own. When there are separate clumps of masking fluid that are no longer attached to the paper, you can brush or pick those off. I'm going to do this for all of my previous examples. Now you will notice that my edges aren't very clean in the areas that I added masking fluid. That is because I didn't use good watercolor paper for these examples. If you use the Fabriano Artistico or Arches hot press watercolor paper, your results will be much better for all of these uses. That is it for this video. Thank you for watching, and until next time, God bless.